Namaste. What do you make of a nation that lies repeatedly, that feels no shame in uttering inanities about bhaichara while instigating terrorism across the border, that seems to think that the world is blind to its two-facedness? Pakistan is failing as a nation and seems to be grasping at straws when its foreign minister makes unfortunate remarks at forums such as the UN. China, their buddy, seems to be faring no better. We shall talk about all this and more with the most charming Deepak Vohra ji, who also happens to be one of India's best looking ambassadors.
Thank you for confirming that.
Yes, I had to.
Thank you.
I have I have visual proof.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, so namaste Deepak ji, welcome yet again to our current affairs show, and it's a delight to have you with us. As you must have heard in my opening remarks, I would want to lead with Bilawal Bhutto's unfortunate remarks about PM Modi at the UN recently. So, what are your thoughts on that?
First of all, thank you very much, Ms. Krishna. Always a pleasure to be on your outstanding show. I'm told that you're hitting several million views. I mean, you've broken all previous records in a very short time, and that's thanks to dedicated reporters, interviewers, people like you who are linked with the, you call it what? City media, city.
Chitti, it's actually Chitti for consciousness.
Understood.
Chitti.
So since you are with Chitti Media and all of you are absolutely outstanding. Now
Thank you,
you've asked
Deepak.
me a question about somebody. What name did you take?
I think the gentleman's name is Bilawal Bhutto.
Who's she? No, okay, all right, okay. Let me answer this, ma'am, and let me tell it to you straight the way it should be done. In interstate as well as in interpersonal relations, rivalry and jealousy is most normal. In 50 years of diplomacy, I've seen this time and again, especially with nations that are neighbors or in the same region. The examples that come readily to my mind are former USSR, USA, East Germany, West Germany, India, Pakistan, Ethiopia, Eritrea, Sudan, South Sudan, North Korea, South Korea, China, Taiwan, Malaysia, Indonesia, Argentina, Brazil, Iran, Saudi Arabia. There's any number, but these are the ones that I can think of immediately. Relationships may have their ups and downs, and bonhomie may triumph from time to time, but the deep rooted feeling of rivalry persists. It's as if every nation wants to be one up on the Jones fellow who's the other nation. But a nation gets into trouble when jealousy becomes its obsessive compulsive disorder. You've heard of a person called Chanakya. I read him every day before going to bed. He had said 2,400 years ago, the wicked burns with the fire of jealousy, seeing the prosperity of others. Since he cannot progress due to his shortcomings, he starts deriding others. How true is this of our neighboring country? You named it. The country that's made. There used to be a cricket player who said he was the prime minister or something like that, and there's some badmash there who claims to be Sharif and says I'm the prime minister. Now, people who are jealous at at the prosperity of others are basically very incompetent. Jealousy is eating up Kazakhstan. I don't call it what its name. Kak means dust. So it's eating up Kazakhstan, the self-styled defender of Islam, even though its antics embarrass most other Islamic nations. Now listen to this, man, and the millions of people watching your show. I want to stress this. Till 15 years ago, Kazakhstan's per capita was higher than India's. It is now half of ours. So, what does it do? It does nothing but compose jeremiads against India. Their litany of complaints and crying all the time. Why? In 2022, prices are soaring, savings are collapsing, food is disappearing, medicines are vanishing, energy is evaporating, growth is sputtering, water is drying, floods have ravaged the land, but our friends from Kazakhstan live in La La Land. Recalling a comment about that country attributed to the Singaporean legend Lee Kuan Yew. Ma'am, what he said, and forgive me, आप हमारी बेटी की उम्र की हैं. How can you help people, this is attributed to Lee Kuan Yew, who are more interested in their virgins in the afterlife than in life in this world? He asked
True.
this question. So, jealousy is the tribute that mediocrity pays to genius. The envious die not once, but as oft as the envied win applause. What is India's reputation today? We saw this in Bali, ma'am, when we were there for the G20 summit. The number of people lining up to greet India's prime minister, lining up to meet our diplomats, our ministers, etc. All of them said, "We admire you. You're a modern, progressive, fast moving nation. We see your pride, your self confidence, your self reliance, and your self esteem." Whereas Kazakhstan is considered universally to be a regressive non-state. They talk of non-state actors. They are a non-state themselves, a perennial beggar stuck in the medieval ages. So when Pakistanis crossed the land border into India, we asked them to set their watches forward by 1,400 years. We are not in the 6th century. We live in the year of our Lord 2022, since we are recording this on the 18th of December. Now, the foreign minister of Pakistan, the foul-mouthed Billy the Kid, and his deputy, Miss Hina something Khar, yeah, with whom he, by the way, he reportedly had an illicit liaison with her a decade ago when she was a foreign minister. Now she's his deputy. So if they use
Interesting.
most foul language against India and its prime minister in the United Nations in December 2022, why am I not surprised? By using this language, Billy the Bum has demeaned himself, his family, and his country. This was not a declamation contest, but a serious interaction with the media in the United Nations. The poor chap, he says what his military wants him to do, forgetting that the military hanged his grandfather and assassinated his mother. And one of his mother's two brothers was killed by the Pakistani police. People claim that it was in the orders of this fellow's mother when she was the prime minister. The other died in mysterious circumstances. Now, a decade or so ago, Hillary Clinton had warned the same Miss Carr, standing next to her, that you cannot rear snakes in your backyard and expect them to bite only your neighbor. It seems Billy Bunter got bitten by one of those snakes and imbibed its venom. If you remember the books, ma'am, you probably read Billy Bunter's books. Well, they were his defining characteristics were greediness, laziness, deceit, slothfulness, self-importance, and conceit. The half smirk on this Billy's face throughout his monologue suggests that unhappiness consumes him. His Indian counterpart, the best foreign minister in human history, Dr. S. Jaishankar, I know him well. He belongs to my service. He has spent more years in diplomacy than Billy has spent on this planet. He is universally respected and admired. I've seen Arab and Asian and African and European leaders and diplomats pay tribute to his wisdom and insight. They often quote him. He has put pesky European journalists in their place. A former India hating Prime Minister of Kazakhstan, a cricket player, he now composes hosannas in praise of India's Prime Minister and Foreign Minister. What is interesting is that Pakistan's political analysts, see, I took the name of that place, its leaders, politicians, and even the usually hyperactive social media are silent on the gutter level language that Billy Bunter has used. There's no sense of outrage. I wonder why. Is Pakistan in so much turmoil, political, social, and economic, that its people have no time for anything else? Or is the media embarrassed by the antics of a clown who masquerades as the foreign minister? Through the years, he has been lampooned by his country's media. I've seen some of those videos where he goes around saying, "हम खून देंगे लेकिन भुट्टो बनेगा पाकिस्तान का नेता. हम सब कुछ करेंगे लेकिन भुट्टो बनेगा पाकिस्तान का नेता." The idea being that I have a divine right to rule this fiefdom that was built by my grandfather, whose own father also was an absolute scoundrel in the Junagadh imbroglio, etc. played. So deceit and treachery is in the DNA of these characters. I hate to say that, but doctors have told me that yes, that is true. Now, how should we respond to what Billy the Buffoon has said? I think a New York trash collector, of course, this is apocryphal, has asked him, "Sir, where do you stash the garbage that you spew? I can go and collect it in advance." There is an International Day Against Hate Speech. Do you know it's celebrated in June every year? It was decreed by the United Nations. But Billy Buddhu probably doesn't know anything about it. You cannot hate other people without hating yourself. And let me conclude, ma'am, this thing about the bum. that in 2019, just weeks after we abrogated Article 370, ending Kashmir's semi autonomy, so to speak, and we mainstreamed it into the great Indian family, anger in Kazakhstan was palpable. Electronic billboards, they depicted barbed wire and dripping blood. They counted the time since the Indian government imposed a curfew on the territory. And at a Pakistan National Defense University conference, both officers and civil society leaders, and I wasn't there, I was told, spoke about the horrible situation of Indian Kashmir. It's like the Gaza Strip, one activist claimed. And when asked, have you ever been to Gaza or Kashmir? And very shamefacedly said no. Then how do you know it's like the Gaza Strip? Now, 3 years later, it is clear that while Kashmiris under Pakistani control remain hobbled by a moribund economy and suppressed by the Jamaat-e-Islami kind of extremism, Kashmiris in India have security. They taste freedom. They thrive. The signs are everywhere, man. I've been to Srinagar more than once in the last year. Yes, there is Indian police there. They have their checkpoints, but those checkpoints are unmanned and traffic flows. I went to Lal Chowk, which used to be a very dangerous place. There was the Indian flag fluttering. Everything was normal. The emergency is over. I mean, long after nightfall, there were people moving around, young people, not so young people, absolutely enjoying themselves. And then, of course, I knew it was back to normal. If you speak Punjabi, I suddenly heard, I'm a Punjabi, I heard somebody calling out, Hanji, samosa khane hain? Would you like some samosas? And I looked, and there was a Mr. Singh who had got his little dhaba over there and was selling piping hot samosas. I knew Kashmir was back to normal. So let me conclude this portion by saying, ma'am, if you permit, that the rich people in Eastern Europe who loot state resources in collusion with the regime, there's a word they use for them. What are they called? Oli, what?
Oligarchs.
What's the word again?
Oligarchs?
Oligarch.
Oligarchs?
So Billy the buffoon actually is a oligarch.
True.
We just know what he's up to, and we just leave it, leave him at it. Who is his role model? His godfather, China, that deals so nicely with its Muslim Uyghurs. The
I
previous
know.
speaker had said, I don't know anything about the Uyghurs, you never heard of that. So this guy now says that India treats its Muslims very badly. Oh, dear me. What do you know about how we treat them? And after his shameful performance, a journalist from France, I studied in France, he WhatsApped me. He said, Mr. Ambassador, what do you think of Pakistani diplomacy? I told him, I think it would be a good idea. I borrowed his
That's,
And the second
that
thing, ma'am, if your enemy is destroying himself, why should you disturb him? Success must attract enemies as a flame attracts moths. This kid, really, he has done himself and his country no good by opening his mouth, and whatever came out of it was certainly not the kind of language that we are used to.
and I think, so if I may, I found that so entertaining. It was informative, but it was your candor is just it's amazing. It's refreshing. It's amazing, and it's just so much humor. So it's suffused with so much humor that I couldn't help laugh out while you were
Thank you.
in the
I
middle
look
of
at this
your.
character, I start laughing because he had this little half smirk, and there's so much going. And Osama bin Laden is dead, but hey, what kind of nonsense is this? I mean, was
He
this a college or a school declamation contest? The man
exactly.
hasn't. He's in his 30s, but I don't think mentally he's beyond six. There is some kind of a disease that he seems to have been
The
born with.
people who calling him the Rahul Gandhi of Pakistan,
Well,
kind
who's she?
of.
Sorry, ma'am.
Very, very droll.
Go right
So
ahead.
I think you've said it all. That the Bilawal Bhuttos of this world, the Billy the Butcher, the Billy the Buddhu, and many other epithets he came up with. I think the less said of these people, the better, because they don't matter in the long run. So
May I say something? I'm sorry to interrupt, ma'am. He used very objectionable gutter level language against our prime minister. His grandfather had done the same. You're too young to know this. This was in 1965, after Kazakhstan had, by treachery, invaded us, and we hit back. We crossed the border into Punjab and Sialkot and so on, and they were on the verge of collapse. So the senior Mr. Bhutto was at that time addressing the UN Security Council. So, in a very well planned move, the Indian delegation, led by Sardar Swaran Singh, our foreign minister at that time, whom I knew and respected great deal, they walked out. It was the first time in the history of the UN Security Council that a major nation had walked out at a point when the senior Mr. Bhutto said, the Indian dogs are leaving. Now, what happened? All the other members said, this is not language we accept. We shall not ever discuss Kashmir again or allow it to be discussed. So, Robert Merton's law of unintended consequences kicked in, and for 40 years after that, nobody ever talked of Kashmir. So, these guys score self goals all the time, but who's
Exactly.
going to teach them?
Yes, yes. And we shouldn't. We should, like you said, let's keep a good thing going. Let's not disturb the stupidity. But on that, since we're talking about Pakistan, there's been some noise lately about reclaiming POK and Gilgit Baltistan, and the fact that the nation has been seeing some trouble lately in those areas. The resurgence and for freedom and trouble brewing there seems to be a good time for us. That's what people are saying. There've been top army brass members of the top army brass who've said things like, this is the time to get POK back and so on. What is the pragmatism of a move like that? And do you think, what are your thoughts really on this, Deepak ji?
You've asked me a very interesting question. I'd like to go back a little bit into history so that people understand. Now, Pakistan occupied Kashmir, we know all about it. They attacked us in 1947, October. The Maharaja of Kashmir signed an instrument of accession. We said, we are not going to help you till you accede to the Union of India formally. Let me also tell you that when we became independent, there were 565 Indian states. And well before the 15th of August 1947, when India became independent, Pakistan didn't. Pakistan was created. They were not a country before that date. So when this happened, ma'am, of the 565, 552 had already acceded to the Union of India before the day of independence. There was, in those days, there were no photocopiers, there was no WhatsApp, there was no whatever, and there were no electronic printers. So everything was cyclo styled. You're too young to remember that. It was an identical document, and all the Maharajas, all the kings of the princely states, which accounted for about 35% of India, the rest was British India, 35% of India, and about 40% of the population. So all of them signed those documents saying, I hereby accede to the Union of India, etc. And then they would sign Maharaja, Dhiraja, Badiraja, Biraja, Kabiraja, ABC, BBC, CTD, whatever their titles were, they would sign that. And they gave it to Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, the Iron Man of India, one of the greatest statesmen ever to have walked on this planet. So he got them all. In the case of Kashmir, the Maharaja also signed the same thing, exactly the same document. The one exception was in all the other cases, there used to be a mountain bottom fellow, I forget his name, my memory is fading. Mountain bottom? What was his name? Fellow with a huge rear. Mount,
Mountbatten.
yeah, Mountain Bottom. That's right. That's the fellow. So this guy, sorry. So this guy actually he would then send a letter. I accept the instrument of accession. That's what they were called. In the case of Kashmir, he said, yes, I accept it. And then he added on his own that soon after these raiders have gone back, we'll have a reference to the people. No one asked him. He was not authorized to say that. But like all Brits, he was a perfidious Albion. So he decided that he would create something that would be a problem for India for years to come. And there's an Urdu poet who said, "Khata lamho ne ki, saza sadiyon ne pai." That you make a mistake in half a second and then you continue to suffer for centuries. We were doing this till a few years ago, till we said, thus far, no further, no more now, we're going to deal with it. Now, whatever, when we threw them out, whatever part of the of the state of Jammu and Kashmir they had occupied were very good. We threw them out, but they retained a certain part. There was a ceasefire. The rest remained with us. Story of Gilgit Baltistan is very, very interesting, man. There, it was the Maharaja's territory. So there was a major red or green or blue or brown or whatever. He was a British fellow, and he was the commander of the Gilgit Scouts. So this guy, when he heard that the Maharaja had signed the instrument of accession in 26th October, I think 1947, he decided that he would betray the oath of loyalty that he had taken to the Maharaja, that he had sworn for the Maharaja. He was commanding the Maharaja's troops. So then he arrested the Maharaja's governor, a chap called Brigadier Ghansara Singh, whom I had met as a kid, and declared for Pakistan. And I'm told when that Tinna, Binna, whatever that character's name was, who was responsible for the creation of Pakistan, when he heard that this chap had said now Gilgit belongs to you, he said, "Where on earth is Gilgit? Never heard of it." So, but anyway, that fellow then got hold of it, and they sent a chap, and he took over for a brief period. Gilgit was even somebody declared independence, and the Pakistani came in. The Pakistani army beat up the fellow, and then they took over. So this is the story. Now, when you betray your oath, I have an oath to the Constitution of India, man. If I betray it, I'm guilty of treason. What do you think the Brits did? They made this guy a knight or a day or an evening. What do they call the fellows whom they give some title to? They
Knight.
knighting.
Sir something.
Yeah, yeah,
Sir
yeah.
something.
So it's knight something. He becomes sir.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Knighthood. Knighthood.
Yes, yes, Sir Betrayer or something like that is the title that they give him. Yes, it's not night. It's no, it's not day. It's night, right? It's not.
It's night.
It's not afternoon or evening. No, it's night. Okay.
It's night.
So yeah, so he withdrew into the night and whatever. So this is what happened. Now, effectively, legally, it belongs to me because when the Maharaja acceded to India, and this is very significant, he didn't say only this part is going to join India and the other part will not. All of his state joined us. I'm not going into the history of Jammu and Kashmir. It was bought by the Dogra Maharaj. All that you can see on that wicked, what is that wicked thing called? Everybody reads.
Wikipedia.
Wikipedia, that's right. So everybody reads that and they keep putting out all kinds of rubbish. So what happened at that point was, therefore, the entire state belonged to us. All of Kashmir belonged to us. Now we have the courage with the present regime, ma'am, and I pay tribute to my leader. I pay tribute to the foreign minister, to the Indian military. They said, Dr. S. Jaishankar, the foreign minister, said a couple of years ago, it's a matter of time before we exercise de facto jurisdiction in that area because that's ours. And then the defense minister, the home minister also said, yes, it's our. Now an army chief says, the moment we get the command, we are ready to move it. That means all the three elements, our diplomacy, our political executive, and the military are on the same page as far as this is concerned. Will we actually move in and take it over, ma'am? I don't know. But all I can say is that, and I love this phrase, they are making a mistake, those characters, by oppressing the people of Gilgit Baltistan. So when your adversary is making a mistake, don't stop him. Let him carry on because that nation is bound to implode. Let me share with you. You're as I mentioned earlier, you're my daughter's age, so forgive me. I go to Kargil. I'm special advisor in the remote Ladakh area. And sometimes when I sit in the Autonomous Hill Development Council office, I have a lot of these fellows, they come from Skardu, they come from Gilgit Baltistan, and they say to us that, they ask me when they know that a foreign service chap is here, an ambassador, could you please extend our visas? Because as the crow flies, it's 60, 70 kilometers, but then they have to go to Islamabad, get a visa, go to Delhi, etc. And they say, our visa is expiring, could you please extend it? And I said, look, I'm no one sitting here in Kargil to extend your visa. Why do you want it extended? The response always is, I speak Balti, which is the local language. And then they say, that's because your part of Kashmir is so beautiful, everything is free, etc., etc., and we feel so secure. And then I say, well, I mean, the part that has been occupied by your country is also very beautiful. I've seen pictures. But don't you feel secure? You have your military there. And the
Correct.
response, ma'am, the response, forgive me.
Mhm.
हाँ सर, मिलिट्री है, शाम को हमारी बेटियां ले जाते हैं, सुबह लौटा देते हैं. Can you believe this? I mean, I'm a father and I have two granddaughters. I I didn't know how to respond. And of course, I couldn't help them out. I said, look, we also have the army here. And they said, well, they are our defenders, sir. वो तो हमारे दोस्त हैं. They are so polite to us. And then they turned to me and said, again, I mean, I'm sorry if I'm indulging in a bit of self-praise. One of them, who was the leader, he said, "Kash mere desh ke paas aap jaise rajdut hote." Well,
Amazing.
I said, well, thank you very much. You guys would have been in deep trouble if I was your Rajdut. So that was what happened. So I think now there is total, there's a feeling of cohesion. Nobody says
Hmm.
don't do it. There are a couple of fellows here and there who have no idea what's going on. They'll keep shouting and screaming and yelling. But by and large, the people of India say that belongs to us, so let's take it back. Prime Minister was the first when he spoke in his Independence Day address. He raised the issue. He said, I've raised this issue, and people actually started emailing him saying, thank you for bringing this to international attention. We are being oppressed. We are very unhappy. Not too long ago, there was a Baloch woman who blew herself up inside the premises of Karachi University, and she didn't blow herself up in the name of Islam. She said she killed a few Chinese teachers there, and she said that we do not want Balochistan to become a Chinese colony. So I'm not doing this for the reason of religion. I'm doing this because we've been colonized. This was the
The ethnic
first time.
identity.
The first time there was a woman suicide bomber who did not use religion as the excuse. They're very, very significant. So we see these trends now happening. People all over the world who live there, I mean, they know that it's a matter of time. And we can do it. We can move in militarily. The cost of a war, it's easy to begin a war, very tough to end it. See what's happening in Ukraine. That's the recent example. And it's very expensive. So let me see what happened. But the people there, given half a chance, they would love to come to it. I mean, the freedom we have here.
Amazing. I mean, there's no land like ours, Deepak ji. That's what I strongly
See,
believe in.
see,
And
there are three things, ma'am. We are going through India's renaissance. And I have seen this across the world during my 50 years in diplomat. There are three things that a nation needs, its people need. The first is self confidence, the second is self esteem, and the third is self reliance. Well, Atmanirbhar Bharat and all that is there. But look at the number of unicorns. Last 3 years, we didn't have too many, but last year and in 2022, we are now hitting 110, these unicorns which have a turnover of over $1 billion. There's fire in the belly of our entrepreneurs. They are burning to achieve. We have over 100,000 startups, tech enabled, and now all this stuff that these kids are doing, it's totally unbelievable. Now there is this desire. Yes, we are proud to be Indians, and we are going to do it because we are the youngest country in the world in terms of youth population. I always tell my friends when I speak, I said 65 crore Indians, like these, if it's a school audience, I say, well, like these kids and like Deepak Vohra are less than 29. And 65 crore, like the teachers sitting behind me, are more than 29. Everybody starts guffawing, but it kind of breaks the ice. So we are at that stage. Yeah, these young kids, later literacy is booming. Which other country builds 1 kilometer of highway every 15 minutes? Which other country opens two bank accounts every second? Which other country builds one toilet every 2 seconds? Ma'am, this is India. When the Chinese virus hit us, there was not one company in India that made personal protective equipment. Not one. And within 3 months, we had 700 companies making PPE. This is the spirit of India. And now, as the Prime Minister said when he dedicated um, the statue of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose in the nation's capital, we are calling it the Central Vista is being redesigned. He just said, today we have liberated our minds. We had liberated our country, we had liberated our economy, we had liberated our politics, but today we have liberated our minds. I truly believe that our kids have liberated their minds. And what's going to is, uh, I know what it was. My grandfather, I remember what had happened to him, ma'am. When we came from Peshawar, I remember as a 5, 6 year old, I would see him every morning, put on his achkan and go off somewhere and come back broken and tired. And I'd say, Granddad, what happened? Where did you go? Where do you go every day? He said, son, we left our property behind in Peshawar, so they're supposed to give us something in return, some compensation in India. And then I'd say, Grandpa, did you get anything? You had gone to see the minister, you'd gone to that rehabilitation or resettlement commission, whatever it was called. And then he would tell me, he said, Kya beta, Angrezon ka zamana tha. He had been trained to believe that the British were superior in every which way. My father's generation, all right. I mean, I was trained by them, but it's okay. My generation, the first born in independent India, like Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who on earth are these guys? We've heard about them, but we don't care. And my kids and grandkids normally takes 3 generations for a country to forget the trauma of its past. And my kids and grandkids, my grandkids in particular, Grandpa, did the British ever rule India? I said, no, sweetheart, they never did. They may have had my body, they never had my heart and mind. They never had my obedience. But they're forgotten, and they don't consider themselves inferior to anybody. So this renaissance, the rejuvenation of the people of India. Now there's another country, one of our neighbors, where there's a character called Ding Ping or Ping Ling or Ping Pong or Ding Dong, something like that. So this character keeps talking about the great rejuvenation of his nation. And each time they ask him, all right, so what's happening to the rejuvenation? Oh, it'll happen in 50 years. Oh, really? So what more, how long do we have to wait? Oh, 100 years. Oh, really? And then what? Oh, after 150 years, we'll see. Whereas I today, ma'am, from the time that I was 20 and was doing television and radio, you know that I used to be considered one of India's greatest television and radio star.
I,
So I
I
used to
had,
go to these um, functions at Republic Day, Independence Day. Um, on Independence Day from the Red Fort, we'd have all these leaders, prime ministers, and so on, saying, we have to do this, we have to do that, we have to think of this, we have to think of that, etc. Here is one man who, in 2022, 15th of August, mounts the ramparts of the Red Fort and says, all right, guys, here's your target 2047 will be a developed country. I was sitting there, I was watching, I was listening, and I turned to my wife. I said, we've been married 45 years. I turned to her and I said, sweetheart, he has given us 25 years to achieve this. Let me promise you, we're not going to wait for 25 years. We'll get there much before.
have it much earlier than that. Yes.
Okay? So this is
That
what inspires us. This is what fires us. This is what has made our blood now so
true.
warm, and we are just bursting with energy. The level of energy in India is quite unbelievable. I mean, now just today, I mean, if you give me a moment, I was reading on one of the social media platforms, and there were two such incidents. One was some time ago, and the other was very recent. So, very recently, this lady had come from somewhere. She bought some alcohol, some exquisite single malt at Bengaluru airport. She got into a cab for women, a pink cab. They also have these cabs because it's late night. You don't want to, all kinds of stories are circulated. And then when she got in, she asked the cab driver when they had traveled quite a bit. She says, did you put that little duty free bag in the cab? That lady said, no, I thought you were going to put it. She says, oh dear, I had 2 bottles of scotch inside that. So then that lady said, wait, let me make a few calls. So she called the team leader of the pink cab in Bengaluru and she said, this is what has happened. So the fellow said, wait, we are going to call back. They called back. She put her phone on speakerphone, and the fellow said, "Ma'am, was it something that you bought at Bengaluru duty free?" She said, "Yes." He said, "What was inside it?" He's also very smart. She said, "There were two
Correct.
bottles of this particular brand of scotch." He said, "Ma'am, it's in my hands. Come back and take it." And this woman says, who posted this, she said, "This is incredible, India. This is the honesty of the people of India. This
Exactly.
is a resurgent India." Then a couple of months ago, I think he was Danish, if I'm not mistaken. He had left his watch behind in the tray. When it goes through immigration, he said it wasn't an expensive watch, but when I was born, my grandfather had put it around my wrist, so it had sentimental value. He says once I got into the aircraft and we had taken off, I realized I didn't have it. So because these days we have this internet on the plane, so he emailed the guys at Bengaluru airport, and he emailed airport's authority and said, this is what happened this time, etc. And he says 5 minutes later, he got a message back, please wait, sir. We are trying to locate it. We'll call you back. He says a few minutes later came a message, yes, sir, we found your watch. And they even sent a picture of the watch. They said, who should we give it to? He said, well, I came to work to do some deal with the Tatas. I have some friends there. Please give it to one of them. They'll come and collect it. And he says, I got my watch back.
Imagine that.
He ended his message with, thank you, India. The real India is different from what is sometimes portrayed, not just by Western media who are jealous. Jealousy is a very dangerous disease, but even by some of our own people.
Yes.
So, this is something I just wanted to tell you, ma'am, that this resurgent India today is, to quote William Wordsworth, bliss, where he was talking about the French Revolution. Bliss was it in that dawn to be alive, but to be young was very heavy. And I say this to you, for me too, it's bliss to be alive today, but for you, it's very heaven.
That was, I mean, just listening you speak about these, especially these two incidents that you just narrated. I mean, there are many, many such stories, and what one feels sad about is that for some reason, though, these stories, although they're there in the public forum, but it's always the naysayers who seem to be hogging all the limelight, and their constant their constant gripe about things not being all not being well with the economy. They're constantly griping about unemployment. They're constantly griping about intolerance. So I just feel that when you were speaking about these particular incidents, I just felt that it's so important for these stories to come out, and I'm sure many more such stories
Oh,
abound,
many, many
and they
more. They are not in the public domain. But what you just said about people griping, when they tell me sometimes, I've spoken to maybe 50 million young and not so young minds across the length and breadth of India. And they tell me, well, we should have the right kind of policies. I said, great. Now you're talking to me about agriculture. And you're saying this is happening bad. So I make you prime minister for 24 hours. What are you going to do about Indian agriculture? And then there is a deafening silence, thundering silence. So, what do you plan to do? Come on, come up with an alternative. Now, I'll tell you a very real experience. About 3 weeks ago, I was at a meeting of some people, and one of them, again, we call them Dukhi Atmas. So he came up and said, you know what happened at that time 2 years ago when we were up the creek without a paddle, the American expression, although the American said up SH-T creek without a paddle. And he said, at that point of time, we should have done this, we should have done that. So I said, Tiger, where were you 2 years ago? He said, I was in India. I said, did you have a zip on your mouth? Why didn't you speak at that time?
two
When the
years
whole thing
ago.
is over, why do you come now and say we should do this, we should do? Why do you live in the past? God doesn't
Mm,
give us eyes at the back of our head, they are in front. We remember our past, but we look to the
mm.
future with confidence. So
True,
ye nahi
true.
hua, wo nahi hua. So Tiger, if we have problems with poverty alleviation, what are you doing about it?
Mm.
Oh,
Correct.
I gifted 1 rupee to somebody. Well, happy birthday. If you think you'll alleviate poverty with that, go out
With
and
that
teach
one.
those people to be self employed. Go out and do other things. Then I will understand. But these are the fellows who sit swigging their expensive drinks in the evening in their plush living rooms and sit and crib. That's all that
Correct.
they are born to do. Because, Satan, I'm told, because of his horns, he has many more adherents than the good guy who doesn't have any horns.
Well said. So Deepak ji, from Kazakhstan to the land where the guy called Dingli or whatever you called him, we forget
Tingling,
his
bing
name,
bing,
right?
mingling,
Ding
whatever. Yeah.
Bing, Ding Bing, or whatever. Yes, this chap sits over there with his whatever on his high horse. So speaking of the recent incident at Tawang, what of course our guys gave them a sound thrashing, which they don't want to admit to. What do you make of it, and do you think that we're going to be seeing more of these kind of
Yeah.
incursions? And
That's a very interesting.
also.
Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Also, since we were speaking of naysayers and we were talking about inconsequential characters, there was a Rahul Gandhi happened to
Who's she?
open his mouth. Yeah, exactly. Like I said, inconsequential, yet nevertheless noisy. So he says that India has given up its territory yet again, and that war is imminent and all of that. So
Sure.
would you care to respond to all of this?
Well, I'm not going to respond to him because we're not trained to respond to our
Not
political
really.
leaders. But let me
Yes.
let me set the issue in perspective. Now, this tingling fellow, when we had that bridge collapse, fatal bridge collapse in Morbi, Gujarat, some months ago, he sent condolence messages to the president and the prime minister. I was worried. I said, where's he going to launch his next aggression? Because his sympathy is always a mask. Sure enough, we had Tawang come by. Now, I know that area very well, ma'am. I know Tawang well. I've been there several. I lost family there in 1962. It still hurts.
I'm
I
so
was
sorry to hear
60,
that.
60 years ago. It still hurts. But now, the reality today is that this is not the India of 1962. Right? That time we fought very bravely, but there was no coordination. We were not well organized. And then those who could get away, they ran and came to Tezpur in whatever way they can. Now, the great thing about the Chinese, particularly about Ding Dong, they are predictably unpredictable. We know exactly what they are going to do next. So this time we were prepared. This is the age of satellite imagery. We knew these fellows were coming. We knew they were massing there. Whether they would dare to cross, that was in their minds. We welcomed them. They claim to be a hyper modern state, but they still fight with clubs and stones. That's their mentality. And we were ready. We had matching equipment. Now,
Equipment.
immediately we said that so many of our soldiers were injured and 8 were in hospital. And I'm told one was badly hurt, but he's well on his way to recovery. We also hear, and again, I have no way of confirming this, that several of their chaps actually died. But
Yes.
Ting will never acknowledge that. He can't. What amazes me is what does he say to the families of those kids? Because this is
Exactly.
the one child, these are all one child family children, these boys. China has a preference for male children, not for female. So these are what they call the little emperors. So what do you tell their parents? Who's going to sweep their tombs? They have a festival called King Ling, the sweeping of the tomb, or King Ming. What do you do? Who's going to clean their tombs? What do you tell them? Because that is a country in which the party owns the military and the party owns the country, not the other way around. But trouble is brewing. That zero COVID policy was an unmitigated disaster. So now
Yes.
they have abandoned it. And then the top health body in China, which is the National Health Commission, they've said that I'm sorry, we're not going to publish any more figures because those figures are not the figures are not reliable. So I asked one of my chaps, I said, one of my colleagues there, I said, what happened to this fellow for saying a thing like this? Is he still alive? He says, I don't know. The fellow who said this, he was the head of the commission. He said, because our own figures are not reliable. So that was something else that we are seeing. Third, ma'am, the economic damage that this zero
Correct.
COVID policy has caused to the country, that will take a long time to be assessed. Companies are leaving. Now, one must also understand that if you're in bed together for 30 years, you can't divorce in 30 minutes. It takes some
True.
time. And the only nation that has the landmass, the educated manpower, the willingness, the willpower, the education levels to be able to welcome these companies into India. That is it. We are the only one. People say, oh, they went to Vietnam, they went to Indonesia. You know, ma'am, I don't know how much you have for dinner. Let's assume that, like me, you have one chapati or two. If someone
Two.
were to give me 50 chapatis, I'd have an upset stomach. So the
True.
economy has to be able to absorb the money, the investment coming in. We are able to absorb it. This year, 2022, we are going to cross $100 billion, $100 billion
Mhm.
in foreign direct investment. We've crossed $100 billion in terms of remittances from the overseas, in what we call the NRIs. So we are seeing a lot of this. Now, I don't know if you've heard of there's this company, I'm trying to remember the name. Um, it'll come back to me in a moment. I'm getting old. But anyway, this is a fellow whose name was, he said something very interesting. He said, this is not just India's decade, it is India's century. And this was, I think,
Wow.
this, yep, it was the CEO of this company, which was whatever the name of the company. It'll come back to me in a moment.
Right.
So he talked about it. He said, "This is what is happening to India at this time. This is what we are seeing in India at this time." And we just understand this, but the West doesn't. It has colluded in its own demise, whether it be American attempts to reorder the world or European assumption that even as the world was turned on its head, nothing need change in Europe. Western arrogance, unfortunately, is persisting. Now, as far as the virus is concerned, ma'am, yeah, we stumbled. We didn't know what to do, but we regained control. You've heard of this expression which says, when the going gets tough, the tough get
One
going.
get very
When
yes.
I add one line, when the going gets toughest, the Indians get going. And the CEO of this company, now I recall, it was McKinsey and Company. Not just India's decade, he said, but India's century. There's a famous Stanford economist and Nobel laureate, Michael Spence. He said, India is the world's outstanding performer in 2022, the most preferred investment destination. Let me once again quote Chanakya for the benefit of the millions who watch your show. When the right action is not taken at the right time, then it is time itself that causes the action to fail. Chanakya said this 2,400 years ago. And Victor Hugo, the French statesman and writer, said 170 years ago, no power on earth can stop an idea whose time has come.
Time has come.
I urge you to read a book written by an American diplomat called Ali Cyrus. I don't get a commission for promoting it. It's called Our Time Has Come, How India is
Uh-huh.
Making Its Place in the World. Our time
Wow.
has come. And ma'am, this book, as you can well understand, it's a bestseller in Kazakhstan. It's about how India's time has come. So
Interesting to know.
on the China issue, uh, he's lost. We've seen this kind of thing in China. When I said they're predictably unpredictable, they had this great leap backward. I think they called it the great leap forward. They had this from the late 50s to the early 60s. And 5 crore, 50 million Chinese died of starvation because they were told, give up your farms, give this up, start producing steel for the great leap forward. But when there was resentment, that Mao Ding Dong fellow, he attacked India in 62. Then he launched his cultural revolution, again to give some direction to unemployed young fellows, but there were millions of them at that time. The economy was in the doldrums. So when that began to collapse, his so-called cultural revolution, he attacked the Soviet Union. And then a few years after his death, his wife, along with 4 other characters, tried to supplant, replace the regime in China. And they were known as the Gang of Four. And so when that was getting too hot, he attacked the Gang of Four, or the fellow, the regime, not the Gang of Four, the actual ruler. I think it was a fellow called Deng Dang Dong or something, Deng Zhao, or something like that. He then attacked Vietnam and got thrashed. 30,000 people killed. So now that he's in trouble, so when I say predictably unpredictable, he has only one template. He has one floppy and he puts that in and he plays it. So we know what he's going to do. I have a large land border. He's done what he wanted to with Nepal. He tried in Bhutan, in Dolam. He got a broken nose. On the sea, he's not going to mess around with me because he's on record as telling his military guys, you better watch out for the Indian Navy because they are capable of surprising you enormously. And he keeps telling his soldiers, you should be ready to fight at a moment's notice. So normally, what are they ready to fight after 3 years? And then he says, you should be absolutely reliable. That means they are unreliable most of the time. And the guy has lost it because their own documents now state that the army is no longer willing to listen to this guy. By the way, he's this tingling fellow in his own country. He's the chairman of everything. He's the chairman of the workers' union, the sweepers' union, the cooks' union, the maids' union, the drivers' union. He's chairman of everything. So when you have something like this, and if you want to post, a driver from this city to that city, he has to personally approve. Total bureaucratic paralysis, we call it nirvana. So they're just sitting back and saying he'll take a decision. By the time the decision comes, I would be in a better world. So why should I bother to do anything? This is what we see. And so,
Fantastic.
to the people of India and those across the world who are watching this, let me just tell you, sons and daughters of India and our friends across the world, he won't dare do anything against us now. We smashed him in Galwan. There we broke his nose. Now we've smashed the entire face. And if he tries once more, we'll also break every bone in his body. You don't mess around with the Indian military because the people of India are solidly behind the army. And we have a prime minister who spends Deepavali, New Year, whatever,
Soldiers.
with the soldiers. We understand this. But of course, I always tease my friends, the generals. I have lots of them. I say, guys, when we discuss China, I say, listen, war is too serious a business to be left to the generals. And they all start. I said, all right, now where do you diplomats fit in? I said, well, we try. When we don't succeed, we ask you. And after you've done what you have to, then we come back and say, okay, now you wait outside the room while we come to a negotiated settlement. We have this. See, we're an open country, we're a free society, so we can joke and laugh about this. Over there,
That's right.
if a Chinese fellow sitting in Brazil or wherever, if he has to find out, somebody asked him, what's the time? He said, wait, I have to cable Beijing for instruction. How can I share the time with you? It's Brazil,
True.
in fact, when the virus was hitting and the Chinese were hiding the fact that they had unleashed this virus. I have seen placards there in Brasilia which said, people died because China lied.
Mm.
So you can
Wow.
imagine what it was like. They were
Yet, for some reason, Deepak ji, I mean, when you speak and you speak of China, and of course, there are increasingly voices today that seem to dismiss. Well, I mean, you can't entirely dismiss this huge country, but the fact that everything is a mess there right now. But for years, China has been able to build a reputation of formidableness. And for some reason the international community still stands in awe or fear. I wonder why that is. For
All right, let me tell
example,
you why it is. Let me tell you how they built this reputation. I was posted in the United States 1982 to 85. So I bought a sweater like this for $10. Now, the production cost in the United States was $6. $2 was the profit for the wholesaler, $2 for the retailer. Along comes this guy and says, why are you spending $5, $6 in making? I'll give it to you for 10 cents. So the capitalist there, he starts doing the bhangla. He says, oh, wow, he's giving it to me for 10 cents. I'll still sell it for $10. So my profit goes up, nothing, no benefit to the consumer. They were blinded by what is called capitalist greed. And they started pouring money, etc. Till China turned around and said, look, guys, I've got your technology. Now you get lost. I'll do it on my own. That is what happened. They are betrayed, but they are unwilling to accept that they made an ass of themselves. All these so-called leaders. There used to be this chap called Barack something or the other, and he said it's going to be the defining partnership of the 21st century between China and the United States. And then the next day, Ping Pong said, "Okay, buddy, if that's the case, then your military and my military are at the same level. So let's divide the world into two." And then Mr. Whatever his name was, he said, "No, no, 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 don't get any such ideas. We are the most powerful nation in human history, period. There's no way that we are going to be equal to you." But that was the kind of, these were the messages coming out. Now the messages seem to be sinking. Now they begin to understand when we talked of high speed train connectivity. And I'll tell you exactly what happened. All these years, we had the same track. And when government and people said, why don't you have your trains move faster? No, we need to have a fresh track, etc., etc. Along comes this regime and says, all right, let's do some modeling and tell me what's the maximum speed. Instead of 80 kilometers an hour, what can we do? And so the modeling came and said, okay, we can do 90. All right, let's see. Can you do a little more? Yes, we can do 110. All right, can you do a little more with the same? Yes, 120, 130, 140. Now, my wife recently had traveled outside the nation's capital in this Vande Bharat train, which was moving at 170 or 180 kilometers an hour. And she says, the moment we entered the train, there was this young hostess who gave me a rose. The food was exquisite. The seats are like in an aircraft because you have television screens in front. And when you go to the toilet, you don't feel like coming out. It smells divine. So, wow,
wow.
just look at this. And we didn't have to import this from anywhere. We did it ourselves because the Japanese Shinkansen high speed trains are coming. So now people are saying this is semi high speed. So, all right, if 180 is semi high speed, then high speed should be 5,000 kilometers. But we haven't reached that level yet. But what I'm trying to say, ma'am, when we set our minds to it,
Mm.
Nothing can stop us. You know,
Nothing can stop us.
let me put it to you. I won't name anybody, but the Prime Minister of one of the African countries that I'm privileged to serve, I'm special advisor in 3 countries in Africa. And something happened. He asked me for some guidance on something. He said, Ambassador, what do you think? Hardly guidance. He just wanted my view. I said, Your Excellency, I don't understand a word about this particular area. It's not my expertise. So, you should get somebody who knows. He said, Yeah, I'll do all that. But what's your opinion? I want to know. I said, All right, Your Excellency, if I were in your place, this is the decision I would take. That's it. I walked out. I said, I don't think he'll take me serious. 3 months later, when I visited that capital again, he called me in. He said, Ambassador Deepak, I listened to you. I did what you had said, and the problem was resolved. The challenge was met successfully. So I said, Well, I looked up at the heavens and I said, Thank God you've saved my job. As I was walking out, he called me back. He said, Ambassador Deepak, are you God? And I turned around to him, I looked at him, and I said, Your Excellency, I'm not God. I'm an Indian. That's the next best thing. And he started clapping his hands. He said, Wow, Ambassador, what an answer you have given me. So I said, Well, Your Excellency, we are Indians. I mean, we can do anything we set our minds to. We've done it on the
Anything.
trains, we've done it in defense. And sons and daughters of India, if you're watching this program, let me assure you, if Dingling or Mingling or Ping Pong tries anything funny, we will smash his board. He won't
Smash.
dare do it.
Mm.
Nobody can stop us. Nobody wants to mess with that. At the time that we had the Tawang clash, a few weeks before that, the Americans were here trying to learn from us all about high altitude warfare because they haven't
Wow.
fought in. There were joint exercise, youth abhyas in a place called Audi. I've been there. I did my skiing there, and we know what it's like to fight at 24,000, 25,000 feet. We know what it's like to fight in minus 20, minus 25, minus 30 degrees Celsius. My boys know it. Why do my boys fight? They fight for their honor. They fight for their dignity. They fight for their self-respect. Why does Ding Ting's fellows fight? They fight because they've been ordered to fight.
Exactly, exactly. There's this very touching story that was doing the rounds, Deepak ji. I'm sure you must have read about it, of that young boy who was a farmer's son who cleared the IIT and concealed the fact from his parents because he wanted to join the army. And he's in the army now. He's a proud officer of the Indian
Oh,
Army,
absolutely.
and that just touched my heart. And that is why the Indian military, the Indian forge is. It's not because of the number of men. It's because of the
The
spirit that they
spirit.
carry.
It's the
Yes,
motivation. Ma'am, I
yes.
invite all those who are watching this program at some point in their lives, if they get a chance to go to Kargil, there's a huge statue of the Lord Buddha. I am a Buddha by belief, a Buddhist by belief. And I wasn't born a Buddhist, I was born a Hindu, a very proud Hindu. But I'm attracted a great deal to his teachings. There's a huge statue, more than 100 feet, in a place called Apati near Kargil, hewn into the mountainside. It's a statue of the Lord Buddha. So there is a tiny little stone at the feet of the Lord, and it's my tombstone. I'm still alive, but it's there. It's something I borrowed from our military. And it simply says there, Deepak Vohra, Indian, 1951, the year I was manufactured in India, eternity. And below that, they have engraved what I asked them to do. It says, scattered in the dust, silent I remain. When India's bugle calls, I will rise again. I'll rise to serve my mother. I have just one mother. Her name is India.
And, so you brought tears to my eyes.
They come to mind too.
I,
At
I,
my
I,
age of
um,
71.
I think India is special that way because I think I can say this with great certainty that the manner in which our people feel for the land, it's a very deep connect. I think it's the attitude of reverence towards a mother, the mother connect. You
We
see,
call her Mother India.
it's not fatherland, it's motherland. So
We
it's
call the गंगा माँ जमुना माँ
ma,
सरस्वती माँ माँ के
ma,
साथ धोखा
exactly.
नहीं करते हैं. That's why we
Correct,
have the
correct.
world's most eco-friendly system, civilization. We don't damage plants and we worship plants. We worship trees.
Worship.
We worship the sun and the moon and the rivers and the mountains and the lakes. We're an amazing civilization. We're an amazing people. We're a very good people.
Absolutely, absolutely, Deepakji. I'm having such a wonderful time talking to you, so I don't want to let go. So I want to stop. I want to conclude with one last question. Of course, moving way away from China and Kazakhstan, you've spent a lot of time, and you mentioned Africa just now. So because we don't get to hear too many stories about Africa and the countries in Africa. We always seem to think of it as one landmass. So you've had several years you've spent, I believe, in Africa. So what has been your, could you give us some insights or share some insights as to the experience of
Yeah.
coloniality in Africa vis-a-vis India? So maybe just if you could briefly.
It's a very good question that you've asked, very intelligent. Let me just say that when you say Africa, it's not one country, there are 54 countries, members of the African Union.
Exactly.
So when we talk of Europe, it's not one country. There may be some similar values. They talk of European values. The Africans don't talk of any kind of common values. The challenge for Africa before the colonizers came, about 10,000 statelets, little kingdoms, little chiefdoms, etc. Then you compress them into 54 nation states in the Westphalian modern sense of the term. Of course, there's going to be a problem. I learned this when I was in South Sudan. So I was going with my driver. I said, look, there's the border with Uganda, let's cross. And then he looked at me bitterly and he said, Ambassador, I can't, even though my brother, that's his house that you're seeing. He said, I need a visa and a passport. And he said, I've argued so often that that's my brother's house. Why can't I go there? What is this nonsense about visas and passport? Anyway, I was able to go, he wasn't, but I didn't go. I came back. So, one of the first things there, again in Africa, what is needed is the liberation of the mind. All right, the colonizers looted you, but they are not going to come back to develop you. If they come back, it will be to loot you even more. Your true friends are the people of India because we do not believe in taking out your resources and taking them as the Chinese do. We believe in building your human resource. The number of universities we are supporting, training centers, information technology, etc. One African leader, I was privileged um, to be with him. He came for medical treatment. We took him to a hospital. He says, "Why do you call yourselves a developing country? Look at the medical facilities you have over there." And then we took him to another place in the southern part of India, to a city uh, from where you come. And when he
Right.
saw that, he said, "No, no, 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 no. This must be New York." I said, "No, sir. This is India." They're
This is India.
amazed at the progress that has been made. So we are the role model because we did it all within a democratic faith. Africa's challenge today is to liberate their minds, which they are doing to a large extent. And they need all the friends they can get in the world. Those Europeans, ma'am, sorry to say this, there is still that arrogance and conceit. You know, there used to be a prime minister of the disunited kingdom, a chap with very funny hair. He was booted out some time ago. I've forgotten his name.
You're the man without a comb.
Yes, yes, John Johnson, I think was his name, something like that.
Yes, something like that.
Something
Yes,
like that.
yes.
So he had once famously said, Africa's problem is not that we were once in charge. The problem is that we are no longer in charge. Look at the arrogance of
Said that. Said that.
Look at the
Wow.
conceit. You don't say these things, not even in jest, because they are
Yes.
sensitive about it. And I've attended so many meetings where they have said, this is our requirement. And what they hear is pontification from all the ambassadors, European ambassadors, Western. Well, you should do this, you should do that. And then they turn around to me and say, Ambassador Deepak, what do you say? I first applaud and I say, I think what you're doing is brilliant. It's a great idea, and we'll help to the extent we can. And then they start clapping. They said, you haven't given us any guidance on being democratic, being this. You don't talk of governance. You just say, look, guys, it's your country. You are the stakeholders. I'm an outsider. What do you want? I'll give it to
I will help you.
you.
Yes.
Whatever you want, I'll help. Yeah,
Wow.
5,000, 6,000 African students come a year to India to study. They want to go back. They absolutely love this place.
They don't want to
We
go back.
treat them
Yes.
as equal. We are a very egalitarian society.
True.
We're a very
True.
open society. People might say we are racist, this, that, and the other. It's not true at all. It may have been, not anymore.
True.
Now, as
And one or
development
two
comes, we open up. Yes, ma'am? Sorry.
no, I was just saying that a couple of stray incidents don't define
Absolutely.
the
You know, as they
there are
say,
exceptions.
two swallows don't summer make kind of thing. So don't worry
Right.
about this. This is not,
So,
this is nothing.
so in Africa, did you not did you find that they've been able to shed this colonial mantle?
Mentality, no. I would say it's a work in progress.
Okay,
They
okay.
look at India, they say, we can do it. If India could, let's also try and do
That's all.
what India has achieved. They look at Kazakhstan, they say, no, no, we don't want that. So they
Mm.
understand, they say, we want to be like India. Open, democratic, free society. Because by tradition, the tribal structure, we use the word tribal for want of a better word, maybe the ethnic structure, those are very, very democratic systems, very open. And African justice, ma'am, is not retributive, it is
Mm.
restorative.
Wow.
Yeah. There's a very famous story. Uh, Let me see if I can get the figures correct. A fellow died with 19 buffaloes and wanted to give 50% to his wife and 30% to his daughter, 20% to his son. How do you divide 19 buffaloes? So the
19.
village got together and gave him a buffalo. Yeah, gave the
Ha,
deceased fellow family. So it became 20. So now they
20.
said 50, to, 10 go to the wife. Great.
Right.
And then they said, all right, now since you have said 30%, that means six go to the daughter. All right, give her six. And then since you have said 3% or 15% or whatever, so now three go to the son. So that gives you 10 plus 6 plus 3, that's 19. So what happens to the 20th? So the village said, well, we gave you that buffalo, we're taking it back.
We're taking it back.
We just gave it to you to make the calculation.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Isn't it wonderful?
Oh
And
my God.
what Madiba, Nelson Mandela had once said, and I heard him say this, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
Go together. Yes,
Very
yes.
beautiful. Very beautiful.
Beautiful. Deepak ji, we'll probably end on that beautiful note. That was I just had such a wonderful time talking to you
Thank you.
today,
Thank you.
and not only was it informative in so many different ways, but I have to say I was giggling like a schoolgirl through it all.
As far as I'm concerned, you're still a little kid.
So I think concession should be made if I were too came across as being too giggly, but I have to say I enjoyed myself thoroughly, and if you were to write a book, I'm going to be the first one to buy it,
Thank you.
because
Thank you.
because your Woodhouseian humor, it's just I couldn't stop giggling. It's just too good. So thank you, Deepak ji, for
Thank you, Miss
giving
Krishna.
your time, and we'll have you again very soon
As
on
soon
yet
as you
another
want,
program.
stay safe, stay blessed.
Yes, yes.
You're a
Thank you
daughter
so
of
much.
India. Thank you.
And namaste to everyone who's watching. And please subscribe, like, share, comment freely, and do keep coming back to us. And Shubhratri. Thank you so much.
Vande Mataram.
Vande Mataram.
Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.